Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's winter driving webinar. We're so glad you could make it. You might notice there's a few people on the side of your screen. They're going to be here to do our chat midway through the webinar. So this is a quick hi, and then see you later to them. For now, if you'd like, you can, our panelists, you can now take your camera off. So before we get started, I just want to let you know, we encourage you to put questions in the question and answer box. We will get to them throughout the presentation, but also midway through when we have our open chat. So definitely put those there. This presentation is recorded, as you might have just seen. I will send, after the fact, the recording around along with the slides for your viewing pleasure, should you need them. Okay. But then who am I? So my name is Devin DeLibero. I am the Electric Vehicle Program Coordinator. I work on the Drive Green team at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And so I will be the one hosting this webinar today. Green Energy Consumers Alliance is a nonprofit based in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, whose mission it is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a zero carbon future. And we do this with our policy and advocacy work, but also with our program work like Drive Green, which is my program that I work on, and we talk all about electric vehicles. So here we go talking about winter driving. Um, so what we'll cover today, oops, hold on, just gonna what we'll cover today is why do EVs lose range in the winter? Because we know that a lot of people are concerned about EVs and impacts of winter driving. In fact, we've done lots of surveys on this, and we found that that's one of the top things that people are worried about and wish they knew a little bit more about before they got their EVs. But we've also heard from them that they are still very happy, and this would not have swayed them from getting an EV. We're also going to talk about the impact of range in colder temperatures and winter driving. And then we're going to talk about winter weather driving itself just a little bit and charging. And then we're going to open it up for a Q&A session with the EV owners that we just saw a little bit before. Okay, so now our first topic is, why do EVs lose range in winter? So gas-powered cars and electric vehicles both lose range in winter. It's just a fact. It's just something that you have to gradually get used to, especially an electric vehicle. They may lose a little bit more range than your typical gas-powered car too, so you want to keep that in mind. But why does this happen? So the chemical and physical reactions in the battery occur more slowly in cold temperatures, and that is what impacts your range, because that's where you get your range from. So what this means is there are longer charging times, and there's also a temporary reduction in range because there's a lower capacity, and that's also due to the heating system. When you're using the heating system or just using energy from your battery in your car in the winter, the energy must be put into warming the battery itself and the cabin features. So that's your, like, just the heat that you turn on, the steering wheel heat if you have it, or like the heated seats. That all leads to increased electrical load, which means less range. There are ways to mitigate that, especially when it comes to like the heating system, which we will talk about in the next slides. So one of the big topics in winter driving is heat pumps versus resistive heaters. Certain EVs have heat pumps to heat their cars, and certain EVs have resistive heaters to heat their cars. Um, you can get one or both. It's not the biggest deal, but if you want to have a little bit more efficiency in the winter months, you might want to go with the heat pumps. So what are they? A resistive heater is electricity that is run through a conductor to produce heat, and that heat is directed into the cabin via fan. This is an energy-intensive process and directly impacts range. While a heat pump is when air is drawn from the outside and run through a condenser that contains refrigerant. The solution is compressed, which raises the temperature, allowing for hot air to be pumped into the cabin, which is another energy-intensive process, but it is more efficient. Now, let me just preface this by saying, You do not need to know the ins and outs of all of this to have an EV or want an EV. This is just a little bit more technical for people who are curious. So I just want to make sure that doesn't scare you away. Um, Now, to truly compare the efficiency of heat pumps and resistive heaters, we need to look at the coefficient of performance, which is also called COP. And that is the ratio of the heat produced and transferred to the cabin versus the energy required to make and move the heat. The heat pump produces heat with less energy. It has a COP rating of 3 to 4, which means for every 1 unit of electricity used, 3 to 4 units of heat are transferred. For resistive heaters, they have a COP score of 1, which means the heat pump is 3 to 4 times more efficient because the resistive heater produces 1 unit of heat for every 1 unit of electricity used. So you can see there might be some advantages to go with the heat pump, a car that has a heat pump. This is a graph that I got from Recurrent Auto, and they got this graph from a couple different studies. Um, so just this, the purpose of this is just to show you the difference in potential range loss when you're using a resistive heater versus a heat pump. So the darker blue means that you're not heating your cabin, and what your range would be like if you're not doing anything in certain temperatures. The yellow is a heat pump if you're using your heat pump, and then the lighter blue is the resistance heater. So in study number 1 at 14 degrees Fahrenheit, you'll see with no heating, the cars had pretty decent range. For the heat pump, there was about a 14% loss of range once that was turned on, which is not so much. And then excuse me, when you turned on the resistive heater, that went from a, 14% loss with a heat pump to about a 40% loss with a resistive heater. In 32 degrees Fahrenheit ranges, in 32 degrees Fahrenheit, this study showed that there was a 6% loss if you use a heat pump and a 25% loss in range if you use a resistive heater. And then the second study compares 14 degrees Fahrenheit to each other. And they found that there was a 20% loss when using a heat pump and a 33% loss when using a resistive heater. All of this is just to say that if you have a car with a heat pump, you might just get a little bit further when you're in cold temperatures than your resistive heater. Now, if you're curious which cars have heat pumps, I have a list. It is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's just some examples of cars with heat pumps. Again, this is not me promoting cars with heat pumps only. You can get both types of cars; they'll both do fine. This one just has a slight advantage, so do with this information what you will. Now I will move on to what impact can I expect on my range. So in this category of the presentation, I have taken 3 different studies and just want to show you what information they have gathered. So the first one, the study was done by the Norwegian Automobile Federation, and they did a test on the most popular EVs in Norway in January of 2020. They found that EVs lose an average of about 20% of their stated range at temperatures near 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Just some things to know about this study in case you're curious. They did not preheat the battery or the cabin. All the cars were driven on the same route on the same day with a similar style of driving and climate control settings. The heater was on 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and the drivers all used regenerative braking. If you're curious to know a little bit more about this test, I do encourage you to check out the link when I send the slides around. Now, when you see an EV listed for sale, or if you're just interested in a particular EV and you're looking at the stats, it'll likely have an EPA estimated range shown. And that's what we show for the range on our Drive Green website, or just, you'll see it anywhere. The EPA estimated range is achievable most of the year, but on cold days, we can expect less than any car's rating. And then this study found that, because there's a 20% loss, that if you drive a car with 250 miles of range, normally you might get anywhere from 195 to 222 miles on a very cold day. But of course, it depends. Loss of range depends on a variety of factors. Those include how cold it is, how many trips you're taking, where you park, the conditions on the road, like heating your cabin if you're heating it on full blast versus just like a moderate heat, all different things. The second study was done by AAA in 2019. They did a study of 5 cars in 20 degrees Fahrenheit weather, 75 degrees, and 95 degrees weather to understand the effects of ambient temperature and resulting HVAC use on EVs or the heating. The 75-degree temperature was used as a baseline because that is about when batteries are really happy, when it's like around 75 degrees or a little bit warmer. I will tell you what cars they used and whether or not they had heat pumps or resistive heaters, because I think that's interesting to know. So the first car was a 2019 BMW i3, which those models had heat pump was optional. The 2019 Chevy Bolt did not have a heat pump, has resistive heaters. The 2018 Nissan Leaf has a heat pump. The 2017 Tesla Model S 75D has a resistive heater, and the 2017 Volkswagen e-Golf that came with either a heat pump or not, so it was an optional feature. And AAA compared how range is affected when not using any of the car's HVAC system versus using the HVAC system in the same cold temperatures, which we just talked about. Without using the HVAC system in the 20 degrees Fahrenheit weather, that resulted in a 12% decrease in range for the vehicle studies, and that means just the vehicle keeping the battery warm sapped about 12% of range. When the researchers added in HVAC to the cabin, they kept the cabin temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, specifically with maximum fan speed, and that decreased range by 41%. Using maximum fan speed is very energy intensive, so the decrease in range is considerable and much higher than what the U.S. Department of Transportation estimates. So that is not the best number to see when you're driving your electric vehicle around. So you really want to make sure you don't do some of those things, which we'll talk about later. And then finally, in 95-degree weather, the range decreased by 4%, which is barely noticeable. And then using the HVAC in these temperatures to cool the cabin resulted in a 17% decrease in range. So you can see heating drains much more of the battery than cooling. Our final study is from Consumer Reports. It's a little bit more recent. They tested all-wheel drive cars in 2022. You can see the cars here on the chart, but I will tell you whether or not they have resistive heaters or heat pumps. So we had the Mach-E, which is a resistive heater. The Ioniq 5, the all-wheel drive option, has the heat pump. Model Y has a heat pump, and ID4 I couldn't figure out which model year they used because from what I've learned, VW stopped putting heat pumps in ID4s in late 2022, so I'm not sure. But they did these tests of these cars on cold days in February, where the average temperature was 16 degrees Fahrenheit, in April, where the average temp was 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and in summer, where the average temp was 85 degrees Fahrenheit. For all 3 tests, the cars were driven on the same 142-mile round-trip route of Connecticut Route 2 and I-91. The adaptive cruise control was set to 70 miles per hour, and regenerative braking was set to its lowest setting. All the cars were charged overnight, and before each of the runs, they were able to precondition the cabin to 72 degrees Fahrenheit while plugged in outdoors. I'll talk about what precondition means later. But know that heating and cooling seats were not used. So in cold temperatures, EVs all lost roughly about 25% of range. And in moderate temps, the range dropped a bit, but nothing really significant. And then the EVs obviously performed best in the 85 degrees weather because that is when batteries are happy and warm. So you can see driving a car in the winter is, you can expect a decrease in range, but it is definitely doable. And that's why you do want an electric vehicle with at least 250 miles of electric range or more, or at least I would. And then just to show you kind of what that can look like in different models, this is also some information that I got from Recurrent Auto. This chart compares 12 popular EV models to show range loss and freezing temps as compared to the ideal driving temperature, which is, like we've said before, anywhere from 75 degrees to 80 something degrees. Recurrent took real world data from over 10,000 vehicles to get all of this. And the data includes variables like uneven terrain, variable driving speeds and uses, and aging vehicle batteries. So you can see that um, the yellow is the ideal temperature range, which got substantially more than the freezing temperature range. And you can kind of make your decisions there whether or not, that car would work for you. And finally, in this section, this is a shout out to one of our EV ambassadors who's on the call today, who will be taking part of our chat session later. So this is from Rod Smith. This is data from his Tesla Model 3 and how it performed in temperatures and what the efficiency was in last year. So his Tesla Model 3 is just a little bit older, so it doesn't have heat pumps. It has resistive heaters. And he had told me that he thinks his car would have even more efficiency if he had the heat pump version of the Tesla Model 3. But you can just see here quickly that even in the 20 to 25 degrees temperatures, his efficiency was still 83% roughly, and that's still pretty good. And even at 15 to 20 degrees, at 71, 72%, I also think that's really good. So it is definitely doable to drive in the winter, whether you have a car with resistive heaters or heat pumps. And just a reminder, before we leave this section, there are lots of different studies that show temperature that cars perform best in temperatures in like the mid to low 80s or even the mid 70s. If you take a lot of short trips in the cold with frequent stops and you're constantly turning your car on and off and need to reheat the battery and the cabin, you will lose about 50% of range. Heat pumps are a little bit more efficient than resistive heaters, so do with that information what you will. And it is expected for vehicles to underperform their rated EPA estimated range in the winter. Okay, well, moving on to our final section before we start our chat. We're going to talk about winter driving and charging. The first part is snow and ice. So we want to know how EVs handle in the snow and the ice because lots of people ask these questions. So they compare pretty comparably to gas-powered cars, but they have an additional advantage because EVs have a lower center of gravity because the batteries are put in like the floorboards of the car, or just below the floorboards. So, they have less of a tendency to roll over and they're also heavier. So don't have to worry too much about that. Another question I get about electric vehicles in the snow and ice is about if there's all-wheel drive options for EVs. And there are tons of all-wheel drive options for EVs now, which is great because a few years ago there weren't that many. And the study that we just talked about, the last study, it was all-wheel drive option cars. So there is plenty to choose from. And then finally, we get asked a lot about winter tires or snow tires and if you need them. And so I would say use your own discretion. It is up to you whether or not you prefer to have snow tires. I myself have never had them. But know that you have to, if you do decide to get them, you want to make sure that any snow tire you get is rated to be used by an electric vehicle because EVs are heavier and because they have instant torque, they have to have special tires as opposed to like a normal tire made for a gas powered car, which really is not a hard thing for you to find. And we can talk all about snow tires in the Q&A if you're interested. And then charging. So charging does matter, and we're just going to talk a little bit about what it means to charge in the winter. Charging does slow down in colder temperatures. We've kind of alluded to that. The battery isn't as happy in those colder temperatures, so it does take a little bit longer for it to warm up and to charge. This is very noticeable for DC fast charging, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then one final point on this slide is that manufacturers are increasingly adding battery conditioning as a feature to prepare the electric vehicle for fast charging, which means that this will, if you're this will make your battery a little bit warmer and a little bit more like ready to receive DC fast charging when it is colder outside. Um, Not all cars have this, but a lot of EVs are coming out with this. A lot of newer EVs are coming out with this. So just something you might want to ask about or be aware of. Then, can you charge outside? Yes, you can definitely charge outside. EVs are fairly popular in a lot of northern countries where they get a lot more snow than we do here in New England or certain parts of the United States. And if they can do it, like if they can do it in Norway and Canada, we can definitely do it in the States. Um, so if you are looking to install something at your home, like a charging unit at home, you do want to look at the rating for the charging unit. So you want to look at the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, or NEMA rating. You want something with a NEMA rating of 3 or 4. So 3 is weather resistant and 4 is a little bit more weather resistant. It's very heavy duty. So you want something around there, and you can install a level 2 charging unit at your home with that. And then one question we actually do get, which is people think that chargers freeze to your car. They should not freeze to your car, so you can easily charge with whatever charger you're using, really at any temperature. It might just charge a little bit slower. Okay, just a couple more slides here. So winter charging times, they are a little bit different than those nice 75-degree charging times. At level 1, most of the energy from charging overnight goes towards keeping the battery warm instead of boosting charging levels. But again, that depends, like if you're charging your car in a warmer place. For level 2, charging times will pick up and level off once the battery warms up enough. It will charge more slowly at first if the car has been powered off and is sitting for a long period of time. So and then for DC fast charging, or level 3, it could take up to 2 times as long to hit 80% compared to other temperatures, which is usually 20 to 30 minutes. And if you're interested to learn more, we got this information from Kelly Blue Book. Okay, now what can you do to mitigate these range impacts? Well, there's several things that you can do. You can precondition your vehicle, and preconditioning means heating up your car's battery while it's still plugged in. This way your battery warms up and operates more efficiently when you start to drive, but you don't have to deplete your battery's reserve to heat it. You can do this on the go with public charging stations too, and consider charging more frequently while on the go. You also might want to consider using the special heating features in your vehicle instead of relying solely on your regular cabin warmer, like when you just turn the heat on. So you might want to use the seat warmers or the steering wheel warmers, because they use less energy and they'll still keep you toasty warm. You want to drive efficiently. So use regenerative braking where you can, and don't be a speed demon. You want to make sure you clean off your car to make sure you can increase efficiency so you don't have any drag from like snow or ice or whatever. You want to park and charge somewhere warm so your battery has the best chance of being warm while it's not working. And then battery conditioning, which we talked about a little bit before. So many newer EVs, if you use the in-car navigation system to head to a charger, the car will condition the battery for optimal charging temperature, meaning your charge time may be reduced. And here's just some fun videos of people driving in the snow. Lots of Norway stuff. But if you're interested, please feel free to click through them once I send the slides along. And then to sum it all up, yes, cold temperatures and winter weather do impact your range as an EV driver. These impacts can be mitigated by simple steps. And obviously, if Norway can do it, we can do it too. So now we're going to move to the EV Ambassador chat. So if my EV ambassadors want to unmute themselves if they haven't already. Okay. and we'll just check out the Q&A and see what we got in there. But before we do, would you all mind just introducing yourselves quickly? Julie, you just turned your camera on, so I'll start with you if you're ready.
Hi. Yes, Julie Johnson. I'm actually based in Northern California. So I do take my Kia Niro up to Lake Tahoe, up in the North Shore. We spend most of our weekends up there. So, and I have a Kia Niro 2019, and I'm looking forward to sharing my experience.
John, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm John Fitzmaurice. I've had EVs since 2017, Chevy Bolts, and now I also have a Rivian R1T truck. I live in the Boston area, and I work for Energy New England, which so I'm an outreach specialist for EVs.
Okay, and then Rod, do you want to go next?
Okay, I'm Rod. I drive a 2019 Tesla Model 3. Before that, I leased a Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid, so I'm also familiar with that vehicle. If anyone has questions about that.
Okay, and Michael, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Michael Fauner. I drive a 22 Volt EUV. Have driven electric since 2017. So I have a wide range of experience since I'm in northern New England, as far as driving in the snow and in cold.
Great. Well, I'm going to start off with a Kia Niro question. This one is, my Kia Niro EV includes a winter mode. I live in Wisconsin. What are recommendations for when to start and when to end winter mode over a year? Julie, you can take a stab, or anyone else can take a stab.
Yeah, I was actually just looking that up because I tinker a lot with my Niro. I do a lot of exploration in the EV settings. And I honestly don't think that I have used the winter mode, but I did a little searching for it. And from what I understand, and with ours, I think with the 2019, if you activate, I think there's something, if you activate it, it will actually turn off your winter mode. But from what I could tell, it was really showcasing that you would utilize that if you're -10 Celsius. So, I probably need to check into that a little bit more. But with Tahoe, I go back and forth. It's mild up there, I mean, we might get into the teens, but it really hasn't been something that I've needed to activate, but it does sound like it's something that would be important in some of the more colder climates. So I wish I could share more, but it sounds like it's definitely an important thing to use for efficiency. And preconditioning before you do DC fast charging. So it's really when it's out in the wilds versus at home, if you do house it in probably in a garage. But if there's anybody else that might have some more insight into that, please. I'm very curious myself. Sorry, I don't have more to share.
Does anyone else want to jump in?
I don't know about winter mode, but your cars also might have what's called snow mode, and that's more important if you don't have winter tires. So snow mode will, if you're driving in the snow, your wheels could lock up, or your regen, if it's too high, could cause it to lock up and slide in ice. So snow mode reduces the chances of locking up. So you might want to check your vehicle. I mean, my Rivian has it, but I know my Bolt does not, because people with Rivian sometimes drive a little crazy going downhill in the snow, and a few folks had lost control, so now they've added that feature. And so you might want to check your vehicle to see if it has that.
I think the winter mode really for the Kia, I think it really does. I think it does have to do with that really, really cold temperature, and it has to do with that, like that ambient temperature for the battery. And when the battery gets really cold, it can get inefficient. But I think that cold number is, again, Wisconsin might get pretty cold, but negative 10 was kind of what I saw there. So I do a little bit of checking on the web and then kind of make that, decision for yourself. And it says efficiency loss. If you used to getting between 3 and 4 miles per kilowatt hour, you could see that drop to, I believe that it showed maybe 2.5 to 3.5. So, there's definitely going to be an efficiency loss, and that's probably because of an added heating element in the car. So that's kind of what I would understand. I'm in the medium and heavy duty electric vehicle space too. So I'm kind of thinking about, and I worked for a company based in Colorado. Sorry, I'm bouncing around the backseat here, but so I do know just in general, even on the big truck side, the vehicles do really well in winter conditions, because I had a fleet of vehicles in New York City during Christmas of 2020, I believe it was. And we never had to pull those vehicles off the road. If the combustion vehicles came off, the electric trucks did as well. So hopefully that kind of helps.
Michael, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I don't know if this affects Kia or not, but if driving in snow is also something you need to be concerned about as far as one pedal driving is concerned. For those of us that do a lot of one pedal driving, if you're going down a hill, it tends to want to slow the vehicle down very quickly. So we highly recommend taking it off of one pedal driving when you're going downhill, because it lets you glide a little bit more, and you can kind of do a little bit of braking on that going down the hill, rather than allowing your car to slow when one pedal driving. So that's something to be concerned with.
I appreciate you, and I know John touched on it a little bit, like talking about that, because from my research, I found that some resources say to use regen like a lot, and then some resources say to not use regenerative braking very much. So it's good to know that, like, when it's actually snowy or icy, you might want to take that off, because you could do some sliding.
Yeah, I live on top of a steep hill, and it's a 12% grade. And if I was to, use regen going down that hill, I'd be off in a ditch. No question about it. And our ditches are 100 feet down, so chances are I don't want to go down there. So that's why I take one pedal off going down a very slippery slope.
Good to know. Rod, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to add that Teslas at least have these customizable settings. I think some other cars do, and they're normally intended for different drivers. So if the car has 2 or 3 drivers, everyone can set their own setting and adjust the seats and so on. But one of the things you can do with that is to adjust the regen settings and anything else that you might want to adjust for driving on snow or ice versus driving on clear roads. So that's a handy way to do the sort of thing that's just been discussed.
Okay. I do have one more question about winter mode. And I just want to make sure that we get to it before we move on. So we talked about winter mode, but we didn't actually talk about what it includes. So does anybody want to expand upon that, if you have a winter mode or something similar in your vehicle?
I can add something here. I just looked it up for Kia. Kia actually does winter mode, includes DC charging performance in cold weather, and reduced regenerative braking. So it's doing the same as snow mode in the Rivian as far as regenerative braking goes.
Cool. Thanks, Sean, for the handy Google. Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that the different driving modes that we have in the Kia, you have 3 different regen options. I sort of equate that to even a combustion vehicle having sport, comfort, and economy. So, thinking about the car that you might be driving now versus going into an EV, it's giving you that ability to create that sort of driver experience, and it is one, tech, it is really tied to that regenerative braking. So, and John, thanks for that winter mode clarity to winter mode, that it actually will take down that regen. Because I have teens that drive my car now, and so I'm always pushing them to keep it in its regen mode, and so they think about it, which is really interesting, and we sort of gamify it a little bit. And it ties right into that one pedal driving, which I like to do a lot of. It's sort of how I like to play with my cars. How much efficiency can I get out of this car? And when I'm in winter conditions, I'm looking at the same thing. I've caught myself taking pictures of, stopping and taking a picture of where that efficiency is, and when I'm going downhill versus uphill and stuff. So, because it's always really intriguing, kind of fun for me. So I hope that's helpful.
And then I have a question. I think it's probably more of a me question. But are the COP numbers or the COP numbers you gave of 3 to 4 measured? That was for heat pumps measured at a specific temperature or averaged over a Boston winter. What I read did not mention a specific temperature. I think that's why they said 3 to 4. I will share the article where I found that after this, and you can look into it. But yeah, there wasn't any weather to speak of in the statistics. So our next question, it says, this is from Ellen. It says, we are traveling for a few weeks this winter. Should we keep our Tesla plugged in the whole time? We have a level 2 charging port, but no garage. Go ahead, Rod.
Sorry, I missed the window. If you're traveling for, I'd say more than a week, it's probably worthwhile keeping the car plugged in. And that would be especially with a Tesla if you're leaving the Sentry mode feature on, because Sentry mode will drain the battery enough that the battery will be dead in about a week and a half or 2 weeks probably if you leave that active. So if you're traveling, leave it plugged in. You can turn on Sentry mode if you want to use that, and it'll keep running. Even if you're not using Sentry mode for more than a couple of weeks, it's definitely worth leaving it plugged in.
Can you explain what Sentry mode is, Rod?
Sure. Sentry mode is a Tesla feature. I think that Rivian has something similar, where it activates all the cameras around the car, and then records constantly to a USB drive that you plug into the car. And then if the car detects anything that thinks is suspicious or weird, it'll save that clip permanently rather than deleting it. And Sentry mode is useful for catching like vandalism going on around the car, or if you're parked on a street or at the end of your driveway or something and someone slams into your car, then it'll record that and you'll have evidence of what happened.
So if they don't use Sentry mode, do you think that they need to plug it in?
Yeah, if you do use Sentry mode, definitely, and leave the car for more than a week, probably even less than a week, then I would say leave it plugged in, because Sentry mode does consume power. The computers that do all this are running 24/7 when you've got Sentry mode active, and so that consumes power and it'll drain the battery in like a week or a week and a half, something like that. If you're not using Sentry mode, then it's likely that the car will be consuming less power, and therefore you could leave it for a longer period of time without being plugged in. But the question said several weeks, and that's a long enough period of time that even without Sentry mode running, it's probably worthwhile leaving it plugged in.
Okay. Michael, you want to go next?
Yeah, basically, one must remember the very basics of electric car ownership. It's ABC. Always be charging. Doesn't hurt the car, doesn't use excessive amounts of electricity, but it does allow the battery to stay in a really happy state. If you've got a maximum charge level set on your car to about 80%, which is what most people usually charge to, regardless of outside temperature, if it's plugged in, your batteries are real happy. So that's very, very simple, very simple approach to, having an electric car. Keep it plugged in.
And John, you want to round us out for this answer?
Yeah, sure. I actually wanted to say the exact same thing that Michael said is ABC, always be charging. But one other feature too, well, I would always plug in the wintertime and if I'm at home. But one other feature too, most EVs have a departure charging, which is really important in the wintertime. You can set, let's say I leave for work at 6 o'clock in the morning every weekday. You can set it on my Bolt and just say, finish charging at 6 a.m. And what that does is it's been plugged in since 6 p.m. the night before, but it does the math and figures out when it needs to charge to get it at 6 o'clock to 80%, if that's what you set it for, to 80%. And what that does is it's just like a cell phone. If you plug your cell phone in, it starts getting warm. So it will just get warm if you're plugged in. And not have to do any battery conditioning, so that in the morning when you get up and you want to take your car out, it's fully charged and it's warm, even without any specific battery conditioning. So destination charging departure charging is definitely a way to go. Interestingly, the Rivian doesn't have departure charging. I know the Tesla does, and the Bolt was the pioneer in that back in 2017. So if you have it, look it up, see if you have it. I would definitely recommend using it.
Okay, and then Julie, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that in the Nero, we can set the temperature and the start time of our day. So, when the teens are jumping in to go to school, the car is at a 75-degree temperature. And I think it's not really cold where we live every day, but lately it's been pretty chilly. So that's a really great feature. And then again, the car is preconditioned. So upon starting and departing, you're gonna utilize less power because the vehicle's ready to go. So these are nice little EV features in the settings that you can set.
Perfect. Okay. I have another question. It's any idea whether the 2023 Bolt EUV uses a heat pump or resistive heating? I believe it's resistive heating, but I'll let my Bolt people answer.
Yeah, it is definitely resistive heating.
Yeah. And I don't know when they come back with the new version of the Bolt, what kind of heating it will have. So stay tuned. Let's see. So I have a question, well, not a question, but a comment from our friend in Ohio. I believe this is Harold. But he says, remind everyone to turn off automatic folding side mirrors so they won't freeze in the folded position. And I believe he has a Tesla. Okay, this one is one pedal mode a setting or a style of driving? I have a Model Y. Go ahead, Rod.
Okay, so one pedal driving is more about settings, although it does affect your style of driving. The details vary from one car to another. In Teslas, there are two settings for regen braking. I believe they're called standard and low. And then there's another option, I think it might even be someplace else in the options screen, which causes the car to apply the brakes when you're regenning and you drop below a certain speed. Because normally regenning is only good down to a certain speed. So if you're traveling at 30 miles an hour and you take your foot off the pedal and it starts to regen, then it'll regen down to like 10 miles an hour or thereabouts, and then you coast like you would in a gas car. But with this other option set, it'll start applying the brakes, and the car will come to a complete stop without you actually touching the brake pedal. The car is actually applying the brakes at those low speeds, but you don't have to touch the brake pedal. So one pedal driving is that you lift your foot off the accelerator, the car starts to slow, and it will eventually come to a complete stop. And when you're using one pedal driving this way, you can drive around for a whole day in city driving and theoretically never touch the brake pedal. Of course, the brake pedal is there, but you would be more likely to use it um, in an emergency situation. So the car ahead of you, slams on its brakes and you need to slam on your brakes, that sort of thing. So that's what it is. Exactly how you get there varies from one car to another. Like I say, in a Tesla, there are the two settings. There's the regen level, and then there's the come to a complete stop setting. I've forgotten what that second one's called. Other cars may have one button or setting for it. I think the Nissan Leaf has something called e-pedal, which is their name for one pedal driving, and there are others as well.
Okay. I have another question, and it's about a recommendation about charging. So should they use a max amps of 48 or taper back to 24 amps? So basically, is there a recommendation to charge at the max or taper it back to a trickle charge if you have the time, Rod?
Um, just about any sort of level one charging, whether it's 24 amps or 32 or 48, is going to be about the same for the battery in terms of the battery health. Um, when you get up to DC fast charging levels, the conventional wisdom is that DC fast charging will degrade the battery faster than level one or level two charging. So the conventional wisdom has been that you should do as much charging as possible with level one or level two and reserve DC fast charging for road trips or other times when you need it. However, there have been some recent studies, mostly or maybe exclusively on Teslas, that show there's basically no difference in battery health. So that concern may be overblown, but for safety, I'd say still do more level two charging than DC fast charging if you have the choice. But the difference between 24 and 48 amps on battery health is likely to be very small, if it exists at all.
Okay. Julie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to just make just to add on, Rod, that was an awesome overview. And I do know, with just being in the bigger battery business, basically with bigger vehicles, a lot of DC fast charging it does happen. And so what we'll do is, after a couple of weeks, put a big truck on a level two charger so that those batteries can get slowly filled up. But even with my car, when I'm charging, I say I go to an EVgo station, which is typically where I'll go when I'm going up to Tahoe. The charging will slow down once it hits 80%, and it kind of goes into a trickle charge for that last 20. So there is a lot of battery protective. There's a lot of focus on battery protection when you get to that last kind of critical state, and that's, it's obviously it's managing heat and just the overall health of the battery. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, from a level two perspective, our level two power can go all the way up to 19 kilowatts in the US. So, we're seeing a lot of that in our space now. Is if you want to do level two, you're going to try and max that level two out as much as possible before you move into a DC. So typically at home we're at 7.6, but you can have 11.2, you can have 13.2, and you can go all the way up to 19. It just really depends on the voltage and the charger that you install. So just a little bit more on that charging side.
Thanks. Rod, you have your hand raised?
No, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay. All right. So this comment is about the Subaru Solterra, which I know none of you have. But just in case, it says, I'm having range issues in hilly, currently cold Vermont. I'm just wondering if anybody has any comments about that or has heard anything about Subarus or has had any issues with hilly, cold places. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I can say with my Nero, because when I'm going to Tahoe, I'm climbing up to the peak, because I'm going up and over for, I mean, I don't know, it could be an hour plus climb. And I definitely can confirm that when I'm going uphill, I have to stop at the top and do a little top off on the vehicle because I'm going, I'm trying to go 225, 240 miles, which is really maxing almost the range on that vehicle. So I do a little top off because even though I'm going to peak back over and I'm going to be putting a lot, I'm going to be putting power back in with the regen, it's just a little too nerve wracking to push that too far. So I would recommend, you know, if at all, tinkering a little bit with just depending on the conditions. Where are you in your regen mode? If you are maximizing it because it's safe to do so, see if that helps, and then really kind of taking being making sure that you're being intentional when you're going downhill on allowing the vehicle to regen. So I mean, I wish I could share more, and I know the Subarus are out right now, and I'm really intrigued with them. So, but if you're already playing like that, great. But if you're not, do a little bit of that, testing to kind of see if there is anything in your driving habit that you could make an impact. But it could just be the drive cycle itself and the cold weather temperature, but also the condition in the car. Anything that anything that's drawing power, which heat definitely does that. So I've got a driver only mode, so I can turn the heat system so that it's only going to heat me in the car and not anybody else. So I'm aware of that as well. And then also using my heat seaters and then trying to pull back a little bit on the heat in the car too, so that I'm not creating a sauna in my environment, which does feel really good when it's cold out. But driver comfort is the number one priority. I always say that. There's just, you never want to sacrifice that, even though in our business sometimes they try and tell drivers to turn the heaters off. We can't have them frozen in their trucks. That makes no sense. But just personal feedback, and then even the experience that I've had on the truck side. Play with it a little bit if you haven't yet. And if there's an outlet for you to share that information too, that would be wonderful for you to be able to share that, because this is really what the OEMs need right now is customer feedback on experience.
I do want to also highlight, now that I'm thinking about it. So we have a Facebook group called the Drive Green Community Group. So these are really awesome questions if you want to hear from more people who have a Subaru Solterra or whatever car that's not represented here today. You can put those questions there and hopefully get some feedback from other people who have the same car as you. Not to toot my own horn or anything or plug my own thing, but just it's a resource that's there if you want it. So I have another question about winter tires. This person wants recommendations. They currently have Tesla MY 19-inch tires, and they want to know if there's any brands that people prefer, or if there's better ones. Or if you even think winter tires are necessary. John, go ahead.
So I have winter tires for my Bolt, and I do recommend going up to Tire Rack, the website, to check out because they're EV rated winter tires. They're Michelin Ice X, but I've also heard that now there are Blizzaks that are very good for winter tires as well. So I would look at that. And there was also regarding tires, it says, do you get 4 or 2? Get 4 winter tires, not 2. You don't want to mismatch your tires. And there's a very good video up on Tire Rack showing all-wheel drive on an ice skating rink compared to just front-wheel drive compared to snow tires or winter tires, because winter tires are for ice as well, and regular all season. So it's a really good video to watch.
Okay, Rod, go ahead.
I recently put new tires on my Tesla Model 3. I went for all season tires because I work from home most days. So I have the luxury of being able to stay home if it's too nasty out. But I did consider getting these all-weather tires, which are different from all-season tires. They're like one review I saw said that all-weather tires are like snow tires or winter tires that you can run all year round. And I was considering getting the Michelin Cross Climate 2s, which are fairly popular. They're maybe not the best compared to other snow tires, but they're pretty good. And they'd have the advantage that you could drive them all year round. The drawback is that they aren't really designed for EVs, so they aren't low rolling resistance. So you'll take a hit on energy efficiency and therefore range, especially in the summer. But I thought I'd just toss that out as a possibility.
Um, just before we get to Julie, John, someone's asking about Rivian winter tires. What do you think? Are there like special tires because Rivians are super big, or?
So there are special tires. Rivian has 3 different tire sizes, the 20-inch, 21 and 22s. I have the 21s, and unfortunately I can't find a winter tire for mine, but mine are rated, the 21s are rated for the winter, and I went through last winter without having a problem. But I would like to find an option. The 20s are mostly for people who do off-roading, and there are lots of 20s size winter tires for the Rivian. 22s are more street tires, and I don't think they're as grippy as the 21s or the 20s, and just as not as popular a size as the 20s. If you really want to drive in the winter in the snow, and you have a lot of snow, like Michael says, where he is, you probably want to get 20-inch tires for your Rivian and get the 20-inch winter tires, which are softer and grippier. The other thing about winter tires too is don't use them once it starts getting warm, because they are soft tires and they will go bald pretty quickly. They're made for the ice. They're made for cold weather.
Cool. Julie, go ahead. You still want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, John, you just gave an awesome overview. I was going to comment that I recently had to replace my tires as well, and I went with all weather. Again, I don't live in the snow conditions every single day, but I did take a leap and not get the EV low resistance tires, and that was based on a recommendation at the tire place that I took the vehicle into, and where I live, we have, I mean, I think a Tesla is like every third car you see. I feel like we do have a lot of EVs in Northern California and Marin and in the Bay Area. So I took a leap of faith, and the tires seem to be doing really well. But again, I think it depends on kind of what your needs are. But we'll be testing those out this winter. But I got real true testimonial from the gentleman that I worked with, because he's very familiar with the tires and actually has them on his own EV. So I think just depending on where you live as well, go with where you're comfortable, and certainly if you're working with some folks that have some good experiences. I think we're still exploring and discovering. So that's sort of my feeling on this. And so far, tires are doing great, as long as my kids don't pop them.
All right. Well, I have one final question. It's not necessarily a winter driving question, but it is a Bolt question. And it's, any thoughts on waiting to purchase the next version of the Chevy Bolt instead of the current one? I heard it will be a different battery configuration. Michael, I was already looking at you. Go ahead.
I knew that was coming my way. Well, basically, you're pretty much too late for getting a current edition Bolt, because basically it ends at the end of this month. And if you want a Bolt with the current configuration, you're going to be buying a used one. If you want a new one, you wait for the new versions, and yes, they will have new batteries. They have a new battery configuration. We don't know, if they're going to be what's currently in the Lyric and the other GM batteries that are coming out in vehicles, or whether they're going to go for the next leap in battery technology. So we don't know what it's going to be, but it will not be what we currently have. Um, it's it's interesting that you ask, do you wait? The problem is we don't know how long that wait's going to be. GM hasn't given any indication as to whether or not it's going to be a year, 2 years, 3 years. We have no clue. But GM's already said we're bringing back the Bolt because they know it's such a hot selling car, and they would really tick off a lot of people if they got rid of it. And I would be the first in line to be ticked off.
True. All right. Well, I just want to say again, thank you for everybody who joined today. We are at time, and thank you to a special shout out to Michael, Rod, John, and Julie. I really appreciate the time you took today to act as panelists and answer questions. Your feedback is always really appreciated, and couldn't have these types of conversations without you. So thank you. And we will see everyone again at a future webinar. Look out for an email from me coming in the next couple of days with all of the information and follow up. But all right. Well, bye everybody. We'll see you soon.
Nice job, Devin.
Thank
All right, thank
you.
you.
Bye.